Sacred story today is Psalm 126. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. Then our mouth was filled with laughter and our tongue with shouts of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we rejoice. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like the watercourses in the Negeb. May those who sow in tears reap with shouts of joy. Those who go out weeping, bear the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, carrying their sheaves. This is the sacred story of God and God's people.
May the still speaking God speak to us this day. Thanks be to God.
The fact that a 41-year-old man is still receiving extravagant gifts from his parents. I'm still their baby. So when the hairless ape, our ancestors, came down out of the trees and they started to walk along the plains of Africa and then started to disperse all through the known world, the very earliest signs of their spirituality, the very first signs that they understood that something bigger and deeper was going on in their lives, was tied very intricately up with the seasons of the earth. That as the earth rotated on its axis and as it circumvented the sun and things changed as it went from warm to warmer to super warm to chillier and darker, and then finally things were kind of blanketed over with a bit of snow. They very quickly started to recognize that maybe that these seasons had something very deep and something meaningful in them. And the cave paintings in France and particularly and the painting on pottery and tools that anthropologists and archaeologists have discovered show that early humans had a deep connection with the seasons. And there is one season above all the others which spoke to their hearts and connected them with the earth, connected them with something bigger and better and greater than themselves, and connected them to each other. And that season is spring. And not only are they cave paintings and tools and pottery that we find these images and this iconography which speaks and communicates a deep connection to spring, but some of the world's most famous tourist destinations and spiritual centers are imbued with a deep spirituality and theology based on spring. What is this? Stonehenge. How many of you have been to Stonehenge? The most famous of all the henges. Built around the year between 3 and 400 CE. It is located, of course, in western Britain on your way to Wales. And it was formed as a sacred and ritualistic spot. But if you are there on the spring equinox, on March 20th, a very special thing happens. That the two entrances at the southwest and the northeast, the sun rises and falls directly in line with the entrances in Stonehenge. The henge on the spring equinox probably was a place where only the highest priest could enter. And though the spiritual significance is lost, there is one theory that says that because of the spring equinox has an equal time of day and night, that for the ancients who used Stonehenge as a spiritual place, as a place of deep connection with the spiritual world, that they thought of it as a thin place. A place where the living and the dead, the material and the spiritual, was so thin that the high priest could communicate with those who had died, those who had passed on before them. So you pass the first one. What's this? The Sphinx, the great Sphinx of Giza in Egypt that guards the great pyramids there. It was built much earlier than Stonehenge. It was built around the year 1200 BCE. And the Sphinx, a lion with a human face which has a very deep mythology all of its own, not only is there to protect the dead, but also, if you watch where the Sphinx is pointing and looking, the Sphinx aligns perfectly with the sunrise on the spring equinox. Among being the protector of the dead, the Sphinx hearkens and signals the rebirth of spring, the planting season, the time of renewal. It looks forward to it. It is literally staring off into the distance, waiting and hoping and wishing that that day will come around again. So you're 2 for 2. You're doing good. Anyone? Oh, the Angkor Wat. There we go. Yes, the Angkor Wat. Now, this is the youngest of all the 3 great structures which I'm going to show you. This was built in the 12th century as a Hindu temple, though today it operates as a Buddhist temple in Cambodia. And thousands of monks and pilgrims come to the Angkor Wat to pray and to participate in rituals and to study. The place is always buzzing with life. When you have thousands of people in one small concentrated area, it is always buzzing with life. But this is the largest religious structure in the world, built in the 12th century. But it is also aligned with the spring equinox. The temple itself becomes a living place on the 20th of March, as it is a symbol of the dance of the cosmos. Across the ceiling of the temple, there is the churning of the Milky Ocean, it is called. As the sun rises and falls on the spring equinox, it bounces off the floor and against mirrors onto the ceiling, and there's equal parts light and darkness on the ceiling that signals an endless cycle of birth and life, maturity, death, and then rebirth. Saint Teresa of Avila once made a point of saying, just as there are seasons in the world around us, so there are seasons in the interior of our life, and we cannot expect it to be otherwise. So other than allergy sufferers like myself, I don't know anyone who doesn't like spring. It is a time of phenomenal renewal and beauty. It is a time when the whole earth is waking up from a long sleep and it's stretching its arms. Everything in the spring feels fresh and new, though I have to admit, San Diego is kind of like an endless spring. So you don't get as much of that cycle here in Southern California as you did, like, say, when I lived in Montana. But there is, even down here, this waking up and this stretching, the opening up the windows, letting the warm breeze flow through. Everything feels fresh. Everything feels new. It's a time to revive your senses and to wake up and to begin again. It is also a romantic time when love seems to be literally in the air. In the springtime of our lives, we feel a very profound sense of hopefulness and possibility is there. So spring is the time of beginnings. It is exciting, it is new, it is full of opportunities and anticipation for the future. Seeded plants that are planted in the spring will take root and mature during the summer to provide us a bountiful harvest in the fall. The reaping of our efforts and everything will draw to a close in the winter. And normally, the seasons are attached to a time of our life. Spring is the time of birth and of being young. Summer is the emerging fullness and prime of our lives. Autumn begins around midlife, and things begin to gray or to white over. And things just take a little bit more effort. And then winter, things slow down, and then finally fade to a finish. But I like to think of these connections not necessarily about the biological eras of our lives, but also about our spiritual eras in our lives. I'm talking less about the concept of aging and more about the concept of growth and progress and transformation. because growing old is mandatory. Growing up is optional. And recognizing what seasons you may be in spiritually is equal to, if not more important than recognizing what season you may be in biologically. I am transitioning from summer to autumn, biologically. Things are graying and whiting, and things just take a little bit more effort to get going in the morning. But the cycle of my spiritual life is continuing to churn. From birth to life to maturity to maturation to withering to dying. But the hope is that it will all circle around yet again. Back around to new birth, to rebirth, to renewal, and to re-energizing, to this resurrection, to this new beginning. And each season is unique and adds dimensions to our life. Spring, again, is about potential and possibilities and promise. Summer is a time of growth and maturity. Things grow to full size, and we invest our time and energies. Autumn is the season of harvest, where we get the best out of ourselves. We reap the bounty of our labor and our work, and we realize the potential, promise, and possibility. And winter is the season of winding down, withdrawal, retreat, closure. Relationships draw to a close. There is a time of ending, and eventually everything dies. It is a period of rest then, and reflection. So what season are you in right now? Are you in springtime in your spiritual life? Are you in autumn? Are you a winter? Are you a summer? The thing about your spiritual seasons is you could be having a winter right in the highest heat of July. Or you can be experiencing the birth of spring in your heart in the dead of November and December. And we know this because of Psalm 26. The poet, the author, the songwriter of this psalm echoes this cycle of birth and life and death, of sowing and laboring and reaping. This is a young psalm. It is not old and jaded like some of the psalms written by David and Solomon. This is a young psalm. It is a springtime psalm. It is a psalm full of springtime theology about God doing a new thing in the lives of the people that are coming back from the exile of Babylon and re-entering Jerusalem, when the temple will be rebuilt. And this is a psalm of ascendancy. They're singing this psalm as they walk up the steps of the new temple that has been reconstructed now that they've come back to their home. The occupation has ceased. The diaspora is over. The exile has ended for the writer of this psalm. God has done great things, and they rejoice for what God has done in their lives. Things seem new and possible. There's promise and possibility. And all of this is born out of the amazing gift of God's grace and renewal, of God's work and working out their liberation from the oppression of Babylon. The writer of this psalm, living in the Babylonian exile and returning to Jerusalem, has gone through all 4 seasons and has cycled back around to spring. And the psalmist is rejoicing. It is springtime in Jerusalem. But it wasn't easy. But the writer can claim that now. Now that it's over. Now that winter is done and spring has come again, the writer can claim that it wasn't easy, but now it's over. There were tears. Did you hear about the tears that were part of the sowing? But those tears reaped shouts of joy. Tears were turned to shouts of joy. And though the writer was penning this poem centuries before that first Easter morn, our Easter season, our season of resurrection, of spring, it just bears all the tones and the echoes of this song. That our Good Friday has come and gone, and we live as post-Easter people today. The springtime symbolism of Easter has been trivialized in our country with cartoonish Easter grass, and fake waxy things. But early Christian interpretations of Easter drew deeply on springtime, picturing human beings being caught up in something new and redemptive, an unending cycle of springtime renewal. But not all things are bad in the United States and in Western culture when it comes to spring. It's not all waxy grass. Our country's actually contributed to spring sometimes. And I'd like to see how our culture and our spiritual lives are married in a wonderful way in springtime. What I like to call the three springs: spring break, spring cleaning, and spring training. Spring break is not just for the young. Indeed, it's wasted on children in school. It really should be for those of us who are working for a living. But there is something about taking a respite, about taking a break. We are all overscheduled, regardless of whether or not you are 2 years old or 92 years old. We all have way too much going on in our lives. So to begin the renewal of the springtime and post-Easter, we need to take some stock in where we can need to take a break. We need to take a respite. We need to take some downtime. Do you take time for yourself? To do nothing? To reflect? To pray? To meditate? To renew, to recharge? If you are in the wintry season of your spiritual life, may I suggest a spring break. But we can't just all take breaks and do nothing but break. We also need to do some spring cleaning. I would invite you to Casa de Kistler. Oh, you should see some of the spring cleaning I did while I took last week off. I cleared out my garage. I can actually get my car and my garage for the first time since I lived in San Diego. Hallelujah. Amen. Not only are we cluttered in our schedule, we're cluttered with things, material things. We have way too much junk, too much stuff. And that materialism, that consumerism, which is sometimes in our culture thought has been a way for us to enhance our lives, indeed actually hinders our spiritual life. Now, we all need some things. We all need enough. But where is your life cluttered with junk, with things that are merely taking up space and crowding your life? So taking a break, doing the good spiritual work of cleaning, for cleanliness is next to godliness, from what I've heard. But lastly, and certainly not least, we need some spring training. Hope springs eternal when catchers and pitchers report to spring training. Even the Cubs and the Padres are 0-0. They're in first place when spring training begins. So where is it that you need to do some spiritual work, some training, some focus? Training a prayer life, studying our scriptures, connecting with God through meditation and quiet, connecting with the earth through spending some time outside, spending time with family, reconnecting with friends. What are things that you can do, that you need to train yourself to do, so that you can transition from winter to spring in this endless cycle of rebirth? The symbolism of Easter is filled with the ideas of spring. And no one captured this more eloquently than Thomas Merton. He wrote of the springtime of our spiritual lives in this way: there is in us an instinct for newness, for renewal, for a liberation of creative power through God's grace and redemption. We seek to awaken ourselves a force which really changes our lives from within, moving us, I would say, from a winter to a spring. And yet the same instinct tells us that this change is a recovery of that which is deepest, most original, and most personal in ourselves. To be born again, according to Thomas Merton, is not to become somebody else. It's to become ourselves. Spring break, spring cleaning, spring training. The ancients understood the spirituality and the depth of springtime. May we stand on their shoulders and practice their ways so that we too can have a springtime in our lives.